Well, we're back on the Herbert Junior Surface Grinder Mark II, and in this video making this balancing ring for the grinding wheel. Now, I don't normally ask people to subscribe, but if you like it, please do. It's time to make a balancing ring for the wheel and its mount out of this. Sorry if my voice sounds a bit husky. My voice has been and gone and is coming back again. Now, I bought this balancing stand from the Auto Jumble. I think it was about £15, so I was about $18 US. A lot of people walked past it. I don't think they knew what it was or they weren't interested. I saw it. Right, I'm having that. And it was around the time that I was trying to balance some pulleys. I didn't know it was actually a stand for balancing grinding wheels until somebody made that comment. So just a piece of standard stock bar. I just want to make sure that this is level. It's not quite, is it? So I'll adjust it here. There is a level bubble on it, but we just need to test it like this, that's all. It's not far off, but it's low at the back. Oh, there you go. Doesn't need much, does it? Doesn't need much, right. So this mounts on a plain shaft. It's not tapered. So that looks heavy there. If I go this way, it should roll towards us, if that's reliable. Yep. So it's got a heavy spot. So let's look at making the balancing flange adapter thingy. I've done a drawing. Just as a double check, I can move this spindle, which is just a piece of bar, hollow. I can move that to anywhere and it won't roll. So it's not that this is bent or anything. Have you noticed that I've got my light here, magnetic, using the 1, 2, 3 blocks as a base? Those 1, 2, 3 blocks that I got. That's about all they're good for, because somebody asked me, 2 or 3 people asked me, it's all right, in comments, what about these holes, the non-threaded holes? Sorry, my voice is going again. The threaded holes, 10mm, there, 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 and there. Nothing around the sides, no. So the question was, what about these holes here? What size are they? Are they clearance holes for these screws? Answer, no. They're the threading size for these screws. So you can't through bolt one to the other. What darn use is that? You could push an 8mm through it, unthreaded, just about. And most of them appear to be like this. So over here in the UK, there's this company called Arc Eurotrade, and they were selling them, which clearly said these were clearance holes. Anyway, I just thought I'd say it. So they're cheap enough, but never mind. If I want to do any kind of design work, I tend to use Microsoft Visio. Although it's not very sophisticated, it's really easy to use and you just move parts around as you like to get things to fit. But with this ring I'm going to make here, it was a bit more complex, and so I used Fusion 360. Now, it was the usual story. I hadn't used it for a couple of years. It's not very intuitive. It's very powerful. But if I find, anyway, if you just want to kind of, hack around, you end up attaching things to the wrong plane. You've got to create new planes. Things start extruding in the wrong direction. But nevertheless, after about an hour or so of messing about last night, I drew this up. It's not dimensionally perfect, but you can see 24 6mm holes around the periphery. You can see that this, when it's machined, will sit on here. There's going to be a couple of screws at the front, so I'll screw into this here, this carrier at the front here, this big washer really. And the idea is that you put 6mm grub screws in to get your balance right. I saw on a channel, if the grub screws are not really heavy enough, just put a little bit of lead underneath the screw, that is. And yeah, so that's the basic design of it. I routed through my box of screws, and I was going to use these 5mm countersunk screws to retain this fixture onto here, but I think they're going to be a bit big. So I'm going to make the fixture first and then figure out what screws to use. Perhaps 4mm, I don't know. Anyway, this is mainly just a straightforward machining job, but to make it a little bit interesting, I'm going to use this trepanning tool, which I made from a piece of scaffolding pipe quite some time ago. The video did quite well on that. And this was my test piece using this tool. And if I put that onto here, you can maybe see it's just about the right size straight off to go over that nut. It should leave about 1mm clearance of this nut either side. Fixed steady, supporting the trepanning tool. This leg of the support just under this scrap channel here, which is a piece of quarter key steel welded on, I think. This aluminium disc is not held in the chuck by much. I'm hoping it's not going to slip. We'll take it steady, 305 RPM, do it by hand. I found a bit of WD-40 spray helps a lot. David Wilkes' channel gave me the idea to make this. He hasn't made any videos in quite a while. I'm not sure that he's very well. I got the impression from a comment that he wasn't so well at the time, because I don't think he's done a video for a couple of years now. But anyway, he did these videos of huge trepanning jobs, so I thought I'd just see if I could make something like that. Right, we can see we're through, because when I set the lathe going, that middle bit will stay still. Done. As I extract this, it's going to leave the centre behind, I think. Yes, it is. And it'll just be a plug. These are not the easiest shots to get with a camera, to be honest. That would have all been swarf and waste if I'd done it any other way. And this is the right size for the nut, I think. I've just hogged this out. So, tricky bit is getting this out again. I've made it a bit too snug. I'm going to have to polish around this washer, I think, to just ease it off slightly. There we go. So chamfer, face, but I'm going to leave the back on for now, because I'll want that to hold this while I drill and tap 24 holes around here. And then after that, I may reduce this. This is probably a bit more meat on there than I might need. I suppose I'd be aiming for about 8. We'll see. Flip it round, then trim it off on the other side, what is now the back side. Tap that down in place. I'll leave that end for people who like to see machining happen. Sometimes people comment, let it run, don't cut it short, let it run. So there you are. Now this is going to be thinned off at the front here, so maybe this ledge here will only be half as thick as this nut. I don't know yet. The idea is that you take that off, tighten that nut up on the stone. When it's tight, drop this back on, 2 screws, hold it in place. That's the idea. It's still a bit snug. Keeps wanting to bind up. There you go. So now, drill and tap round there. We'll get a centre line on this. Slightly naughty, but it's okay on something soft. This lip is probably 12mm, and when we've finished it'll be about 8. This screw is 6 long, so I just want enough for the screw to go in, and then maybe put a bit of lead or something under it if I need to. That's the setup. I'm going to use the quick index 24 holes on the dividing head to step this round. I'm using one of the spot drills that Brad gave me. So I'll go around once spotting it, then drill it 5mm, and then I'll go around with the tapping head, all being well. Now I may have to set it up again for the tapping head because I don't know quite what height I want yet, but that's not a problem. But I'll leave it for another day because my throat is giving me a bit of, Back onto the balancing ring. It must be 3 weeks at least since I looked at this because of illness and being away, but I've also been working on another big job which I might share with you at some point, maybe even before this, I don't know yet. So I've spot drilled it here, and the next thing is to drill it for 6mm metric tapping, so that'll be a 5mm drill. And I'll use one of these new cobalt drills which I showed you a few videos ago. So 5mm there, I think, yeah. 5mm into soft aluminium. I've got the drill on 2530, which is top speed. I still haven't taken this apart to clean it yet. Well, at least to check it anyway inside. These handles are still unscrewing. It's a 2-minute job to Loctite those in. I just haven't got round to it yet. It's on the list somewhere. My tapping head was a very lucky buy on eBay. I think the person who's selling it didn't really know what it was. And I bought it for something ridiculous like 12 or 14 pounds. Now if you look up tapping heads, you'll be easily paying £100. Some are on at £200, I've just noticed. So to pay that price, I mean £100 is 125 US in case you're wondering. Now I made this reaction arm bracket for my tapping head pretty much as soon as I got it, and you'll see why in a second. No, it's not going to go, is it? Let's have a look. That's a 4:2 Morse taper adapter. It gives me a bit more room to play with if I use a 4:2, but that ain't going to go in, is it? No. So we'll have to lower the table and reset it. The tap's already in the tapping head. Okay, so you see what that does. Now I've got to realign it. So this is automatic in that it taps down and then extracts when you release the handle, but it doesn't have a clutch. After experimenting a little bit, I've set this to 250 RPM. Now when I start it up, you'll see that this is spinning in reverse, but as I bring this down, once it starts to feel any pressure, it'll switch to forward motion. That's the idea anyway. And once I've cut one, I'll just try one of those grub screws in it and make sure I've got it right. And as I lift it, it then extracts. And if you've got to be careful that it's pushed hard into the taper, because otherwise you know what's going to happen, it'll drop out of the taper as you lift. This looks good, but it's always best to test it, because you just want to make one mistake instead of 24 if you can manage. But I think we're ready to go around the rest. The thing about this tapping head I've just remembered is you've got to be quite firm with it. There's no good, I don't want to say the word, being too gentle with it. That'll do. Sissying about or something. Right, let's go. Number 2. That's it. Number 3. This is so quick when it's set up. I don't know how many you'd have to be doing to make it worthwhile. Of course, it depends on the size of the thread as well, because on the big threads you need a lot of force. So that's 24 done now. Didn't take long, did it, once we'd got it right. So, got some bearing here which we'll have to take off, and then we'll put it in the lathe. The jaw's in here, internally. And then we need to be thinner, this dimension thinner. So, yeah, you can see how deep that is there. You'll only need probably, let's say 3 mil. And then we need it thinner this way too. So there's the grub screw. So it just needs to be deep enough, thick enough, wide enough, whatever the word is, to just be able to put a little bit of lead at the bottom of that threaded hole, that's all. So off to the lathe next. I want these threaded holes to be about 9mm deep. It's 12.6 across here, so that's 3.6 to come off, give or take. My son's here with his car, working on it, making a noise, and it seems like everything that he does involves revving up the engine, so I'm sure if he was polishing the lights it would have to involve revving up the engine. Kids, eh? Just a trim to start with to see what sort of finish we get. Not in a rush. I've set a bed stop just as a guide. Now at the Auto Jumble last month I was looking for some inserts to cut aluminium. I couldn't find anything. It's all a bit hit and miss. So I'm just using a high-speed steel tool with a fair bit of rake on it. Oh, you can just hear it going over those drilled holes. I just keep an eye on my bed stop. I don't really want to run into the chuck. It's about there. That's it. Okay, so I'll just hack away at that and get that down to 9mm wall thickness here. There's 7mm to come off this front face. 0.5 millimeter cut. Well, that's going to be a tangle, isn't it? Bird's nest. See how we get on. Are we there? Yes. It's going to be slow going, isn't it? Need a chip breaker. And not to cut my fingers either. So far I've cut 3.5mm off the front of this. And you know, it's red hot. I can barely keep my hands on it. Now I don't want to put coolant on it because it'll just spray absolutely everywhere. But I'm just mindful that this will be expanding in here, getting so hot. So I've just been tightening the chuck as I've been going along. I don't want the thing springing out on me. So I've got a couple of 4mm, what do you call them, countersunk Allen to go in there. Whoops! It's broken loose. Darn it. It was only gripping on the edge of those jaws. You know, everything's always a bit more complicated than you imagine. It's been a bit tricky to get this right. Particularly, as before, there wasn't enough here for these jaws to hold. So I've had to put some packing spaces in to create enough lip on here. But then I had to drill and put the thread in this side to hold it, and all sorts. So it's been a bit slow and tricky. The last thing I need to do on this is to countersink it, make it the same as this though, and then thread it. And then obviously these screws, they'll just have to be shortened a little bit. I've shortened the screws and I've pipped it there and there. I think it would go on either way round, but just to be sure. Now yesterday we had a general election, a national election, and today we have a new government. Quite exciting, and that's all I'm going to say about that, because politics is a very divisive subject, so whatever I said, some people would be happy and others wouldn't. So we just note the passing of the previous government and the new one coming in today. Quite a big deal for people here in the UK, I think. Whether you like it or not. This ring has to come off again now, because this washer needs to be mounted on here first before the ring goes on. With this nut, and I've got this C-spanner adjustable flexible C-spannery thing from a bicycle, I believe, probably from the bottom bracket of a bicycle, to tighten this up. And I'll just have to think about how tight to make it. Tight enough to clamp the paper, I suppose, without cracking the stone. In an emergency, I could probably get that on there to give it a bit of a pull round without taking this off. Or I could make a spanner which has got legs on it to fit in here, and then we'd put a bar into here just to hold this still on the grinder.